Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to the latest Friday morning drop-in session. This morning's topic is the process of process management, and it might sound a little bit cryptic, but essentially, we're getting increasing requests for support, ideas, and models around how to manage process improvement at a quite a large scale. And as a team at Skore, we've obviously been involved in this sort of work for many years. Some of us almost 2 decades. And so we have quite a lot of tools and assets available to us. And what we've typically done with each of these requests when they come in is to sort of pull together all the information we've got, and then adapt it for each scenario or situation. But as we're getting more and more of these requests coming in, it makes sense for us to start to genericize some of those tools and make them available to the whole community. So this is the first one of those assets that we'll be releasing either through the template library, and so that you'll be able to copy it into your own workspaces or through the community in general. And hopefully what will happen is over time we'll start to build these things, because these different assets, as you'll start to see, will all kind of link in with each other and all work together. So we'll start to build up a library of these tools that will be available. So the first of these that I'm going to take you through today, so that this particular process isn't yet available for the template library, but should be in the next week or so. So it's a bit of a sneak preview, but it's also actually quite a high level process in terms of it essentially tries to answer two questions. It's how do we go about launching new processes in an organization at scale, but also it starts to look at how do we maintain those assets. So once we've invested all the time and effort in capturing and launching a process in the first instance, how do we make sure that we keep that up to date so it stays relevant, but also how do we drive value out of that asset? Because it's one thing to sort of spend time or invest time updating a process and keeping it relevant all the time, but actually how do we get value out of that process on an ongoing basis? So let me share my screen so you can actually see the process that I'm talking about. Okay, I should have brought this up first. So you'll see again, just in our typical style, at a very high level, it's a very simple process. And in fact, this process is really it's a loop or almost an iterative type process. So typically when people embark on a piece of work that involves Skore or something similar, there's a specific initiative or a specific problem that they're out to solve. Once they've been through that sort of initial process discovery, analysis, improvement, and launch or rollout piece of work, that they have this asset, and they'll then look at what's the next issue we're going to deal with, and so on. And then that grows to become maybe a much more managed plan of documenting and improving processes. So whatever it is, there's some sort of improvement initiative that kicks off, and so we go through this process of documenting and designing the processes. So that's maybe documenting as is processes and then looking to design the to-be process of the future. There's a preparation piece of work that we often need to go through, and that will depend on the size of the process. So in many of the programs we've been involved in the past, we're talking about huge end-to-end processes, and sometimes they're very small. So just like any process that you might describe in Skore, the amount of detail that you may need to go into on one project versus the next could vary quite a lot. And so we're trying to cover quite a broad range of different things here. And then we look at actually how do you just go about the business as usual operation of that process. And then we talk about the sustain and improve. So this is where I mentioned before about how do we really drive value out of those assets that we've got, and out of that comes an awareness of change, but also feedback and improvements and learnings, which may then lead to either new processes that you're implementing or actually updating and improving existing processes. So I'm not going to go through every single detail of this process. We will drill down into a couple of these areas just to sort of give you an overview of them. But the area I do want to talk about is actually the key roles. So we've highlighted a very high level set of roles just to consider when putting something like this together. And as well as the roles, you need to think about the model that you're actually going to implement here. So when you're running a program like this, or looking at a organization-wide process management piece of work, you need to think about whether we're doing this centrally, so there's a central team managing it, or whether it's distributed, or a combination of the two. And in fact, most cases, where we've done this successfully, it's been that sort of hybrid model. Now, it often starts very much as a central piece of work, like a central team, and then gradually becomes distributed. And so some of the roles that we describe in here actually it can start in one of those and move to the other. And I'll just quickly talk about some of these. So we talk about, again, the role titles might change depending on the organization, so on. I've got a process excellence manager we've described. So this is the person sort of running that central team, and would essentially be the process owner for this process that we're describing. We've seen them called the business excellence manager, or the business operation performance manager, all sorts of different things. But it's that sort of central team that's helping to run the processes and the system like Skore. Of course, again, depending on the scale that you're looking at, you may look to have project managers, project leaders. So you may have specific change projects that are involving processes going on. So there'll be a project leader type role. Again, this is one of those ones which could be central in that core team, or actually could be distributed out amongst the other teams. One of the key, not so much a role, more of as a team or a group, but is to have some sort of steering group that acts as a governance function. So this is about making sure the approach that we're taking is the right approach. It's about having views from across the organization to make sure that this central team are taking on board any of the concerns that the different members of the organization have. But it's also about building legitimacy and creating that link between the sort of day-to-day operations of the processes and the sort of strategic level of the organization. And so, to give you an example, some of the larger organizations that we've worked with over the years may actually have C-level execs as part of that steering group. So one of the other key roles in any operation like this is a process owner. Well, obviously that fits in the distributed roles, because process owners are the people throughout the business that are accountable for their own processes. Now, often you might find that you've got processes owners in that steering group, but equally you can have the boss of the process owner, if you like, in that group, or the boss's boss. So you have someone quite senior in there, because that's giving you that very senior level buy-in for this for the exercise. And it also helps to ensure that whatever you're doing continues to be aligned with this strategic direction of the organization. Process analyst here, again, these role names change from organization to organization and team to team, but here we're mainly talking about the people who are either the process mappers or the facilitators, combination of the two sometimes. And very much, again, this is one of those roles where we see early on they tend to be central. It's a core team of people who get trained up to do this, do it really well, and then they'll go out on project by project basis to help teams document, analyze and improve their processes. But as the organization matures, often you'll see teams start to say, okay, this is really valuable to us, we want this capability within our team on an ongoing basis. So they'll often develop that role within the team itself, and that might be a full-time or part-time role depending on the size of the organization. The roles then that tend to be typically distributed, we mentioned the process owner, but the other one which I think which we found really powerful when implementing, which we don't It's not something that we have commonly seen, but when it's done and it's done well, it works really, really well. And that's what we've called the change champion here. So this is somebody often who reports direct to the process owner, who essentially has the responsibility for making sure that all of this stuff happens within that process. So it's about making sure that those processes are being documented. It's about making sure that those processes are being regularly reviewed. It's about working with the analyst and the process owner, sort of creating that bridge so that, you know, when you do identify issues within the process, or you've got feedback from the review sessions, those are fed back to the process analyst to make sure that work happens. And again, one of the things that we found that works really well in a larger organizations with these change champions is that if you can link their performance to some sort of objectives or incentive, so they have a specific objective to do this work. So typically it's not a full-time role, right? These people have a day job, and this is something that they take on in addition to that day job, because it's not a massive amount of work, but it's a very important piece of work to making sure it gets done. So again, we've got the descriptions here, and this will be available to everybody in the template once they can access it. So I'm going to just pick a couple of areas here just to drill down into, just to kind of give you a bit of an overview of the process. As I said, I'm not going to go into lots and lots of detail. Some of it is quite heavy, the process, and again, that's indicative of the fact that this has been used in some quite large organizations. And so, you know, it's really up to you to sort of pick and choose what you want to use and when within the process. So you can see I want to go into the document design process. We've got design and integrate processes. This has quite a lot of sign-off steps in it, and again, you know, it'll depend on that sort of level of detail that you're looking at in the process, whether it's something very tactical versus something very big and strategic, to what level you'd need to go through steering group approvals and so on. And I go down into another level of detail, and you can see this essentially becomes a bit of a checklist, really, for you to think about with each process that you're rolling out. You know, defining it starts to become the familiar stuff, like defining the scope, identifying the process owner. You know, we talk about approving the scope of the process, because again, when you're doing this at scale, you start to realize that the process is all interlinked and bumping into each other. So again, your governance is about making sure that those processes are adequately integrated, that we're not duplicating effort and so on. One of the things we talk about here is mapping process according to guidelines. Now, of course, one of the things that Skore's great at doing is kind of restricting what you can do and how you map a process. But even then, we always recommend that you put together and agree some sort of guidelines, because that gives you a sort of quality standard, if you like, to make sure that you're building processes that are easy to use, easy to read. You're doing it in a consistent way for your organization, using terminology that your organization recognizes. Again, this will be, we don't have it available, a sort of generic version of this available today, but this is another one of the assets that we're working on and we'll be making available very soon for everyone to be able to download, a sort of base set of guidelines for mapping your process, which you'll be able to take and customize as an you know, in whatever way you need to. Okay, I'm going to go back up again. I'm going to go back up to the top, because I do want to talk a little bit about this phase here. So that first one is as it's described, it's all about the actual capture of the process and designing the to-be state, or in fact designing a completely new process if one doesn't exist today. Out of the back of that, again, this will depend on the size of the process that you're launching, but it's okay, how do we actually push this out to people? Because as I'm sure you'll all know, even if you only set out to document the as-is process, how it is today, you will invariably find improvements and changes that are required to the process. And so there will be a change in the way that people work once you launch that process. And so these two boxes really talk about the sorts of things you need to consider when you're doing that. So the first one, just quickly going, this is talking about identifying those change champions. It's making sure those change champions know what is expected of them. It's about making sure that they are training the users to be able to follow those processes, especially if they're new processes and people aren't familiar with them, or training people on the changes of those processes and so on. The other box here, which is a really, really important one and often gets forgotten, is about making sure that the people themselves who are going to be operating these processes are prepared for them. And so this goes in and talks about, understanding your current team, looking at the job descriptions that Skore produces to make sure that they match, if you're making a change to that process, do the people you've got in the current team, do they have the necessary skills to operate that process? Actually, do we have enough people? Do we need to go and hire people, and so on? So this area is just thinking about, have you got people trained up? Do they have you got the right people? Do you need to go and hire, and so on? And then the last piece I want to talk about very quickly is this piece about that sort of sustaining. So how do you go on, sustain the asset once you've created it, and make sure that you're continuing to drive value for it? And this is about sorry, I've got the wrong one. This is about going into operate process. So this is about making sure that people are using the process. Obviously, they're aware of its existence. They can access it when they've got questions about the process. But actually, it's as much about thinking about how do we track the process. So we talk about PPI, so process performance indicators, and this is again one of those things that the change champion is responsible for. So they need to spend time thinking about what are we going to measure in the process. So PPIs are different from your KPIs, okay? Because what your KPI is the measure that's important to the business, right? The PPI is a measure that's saying, right, we've defined this process that we believe is going to deliver us the KPIs. The PPI is about telling us how closely people are adhering to that process. And so that's really important, because what it starts to do is it allows us to see that, if everyone's adhering to the process and they're executing it properly, but our KPIs are down, aren't where we want them to be, then our process is probably wrong. Whereas if our KPIs are down and our PPIs are down, well, we don't know whether it's the process, because people are going and doing whatever they want. Okay, so what the PPI is doing is helping to ensure that the process is actually helping us deliver our KPIs, and if it's not, then it allows us to look at the process, analyze it, and change the work we do. And in order for this to work, you have to run regular meetings within the team, and these don't have to be very onerous, but it's just about coming back to the team and saying, okay, what's working well, what's not working well, what should we do differently? So again, it's the change champion has that responsibility for making sure there's a plan in place to have regular review meetings, and making sure that people are comfortable with the PPIs that have been selected, and then feeding that information back to the process analyst to make sure that the processes are updated on a regular basis. Just one last thing I'm going to say, because I'm going to stop in a second. Talked a lot so far, but just in terms of the PPIs, one of the things we have found is that they can change quite often, because what will happen is you'll identify a PPI, and recommendation is to keep this quite simple, not make it too much effort to gather the data. You'll find that people will identify a PPI, and it might be something like ensuring that the correct form is used for every time it's required. You'll find that once you start measuring that, it very, very quickly becomes 100%. Like, we're 100% compliant on this PPI, and that's great. So what we recommend at that point is just have a bit of a think about it and say, okay, let's measure something else instead. It's not about it's not about having hundreds of these things. It's about having one or two, measuring it. As I said, it becomes 100% because it's an easy thing to do. People know they're being measured, so they make sure they do it correctly. And that will change over time, but it's, you know, it's just helping you keep that alignment between the process and the work you're doing and how it's contributing to your KPIs. So I'm going to quickly just nip up to the top. There are a couple of other boxes down here. So we talk about other things to consider when running something like this is, you know, if you've got a platform like Skore, you're capturing and you've got that documentation, it's just monitoring the usage of those. These things all sort of go in combination with the PPIs and the number of review meetings that are being done across the whole organization, that sort of thing. Talk about the standards and best practice I mentioned before. Again, monitoring reviews I just mentioned, and you know, if you can, as a central team, it's about providing ideas, you know, to the distributed teams about how they can improve processes and make them better. Realize I've done quite a lot of talking, so I'm going to stop at that point and ask if there are any questions.